Hey, everybody. Welcome to this episode of the W Production Podcast. I'm Dr. John Meis with my partner, Wendy Briggs. Hey, Wendy.
How's it going, Dr. John?
How awesome. And we have with us today Dr. Len Tao. And Wendy's going to tell us all about Dr. Len.
That's right. I'm sure many of you know Dr. Tao already. He doesn't need much of an introduction, but let's give him an official introduction that he's probably earned, right? He deserves that. Dr. Tao is the celebrated author of the Raving Patients best-selling book, right? He also has another book that's 100 plus tips to 100 5-star reviews in 100 days. Dr. Len transitioned from clinical practice in December of 2022 after more than 2 decades. And his focus now really is to help practices unlock their revenue potential. Throughout your career, you were wildly successful as well. Pennsylvania Center for Dental Excellence in Philadelphia became a premier destination for outstanding patient care and innovative dental solutions. And you've continued to do great work in dentistry here today. I've been a guest on your podcast. We are having you as a guest on our podcast. And I can tell you that out of all the speakers and all the experts that we hear from in regards to providing 5-star patient care and generating 5-star reviews after providing that patient care, Dr. Tao has become a really highly thought of, esteemed expert in the field in dentistry in this category, especially. So welcome to the podcast, Dr. Tao. We're delighted you're here.
Well, please call me Len. I know we've discussed that before. I much prefer Len. I am a doctor. I practiced for 23 years. I know I deserve or have that respect, but I like Len much better. So I appreciate it. Thank you so much for that introduction. And I'm excited to spend some time with you and hopefully entertain and educate the listeners.
Yeah, fantastic.
Very good. Very good.
So there's been some noise in the review world. Tell us what's going on.
Yeah, a lot of noise, and I was knee deep in it for quite a long time. I spent hours dealing with this. So on Thursday, which was February 9th, 8th, I got reports of dental practices freaking out because they thought they were losing Google reviews. And what was happening was the number that Google was showing was decreasing multiple times per day. When you wake up in the morning, there's more reviews that are missing. And people thought they were actually losing reviews. And that was the initial instinct, because you don't really count the reviews. Unless you have 10 or 20, you don't really count them. Some people obviously have 1,000 and they thought their numbers were going down. And we soon realized, I was actually sent a report by another dentist who counted his, actually. He has like 600 and he counted each and every one of them. And he realized that he wasn't missing any of them. So I posted in my group that I think it's a glitch with the number of reviews Google is actually showing, and you haven't lost anything. And then all these offices confirmed that that was the case. And we had reached out to Google, and Google became aware of the problem. They're always doing new algorithms, and the latest algorithm just had a glitch in it, and it was taking reviews down on the number, but wasn't removing the Google reviews actually. And so thank God, after a couple of days, we're reporting everybody is back to where they were. But it made people freak out because generating reviews is a job in and of itself. And offices work really hard. It has major effect on where offices rank. It really makes patients decide whether to use the office or not. Offices were complaining, which I was surprised at because I didn't witness it myself, that they would go down from 5 stars to 4.9 or 4.9 to 4.8. Not a significant difference, but when you rely on these for patients, it kind of sent a real scare through the industry. So thank God it's all taken care of, and we're on to the next chapter now. Basically, is what it is.
You never know what they're going to do, right? It's changing all the time. And why you teach and we teach, the best way to get more patients is to have an outstanding patient experience, because all these other things can come and go. And so awesome.
Yeah, I think it's also important to note that it was all businesses, not just dentists, but of course our world is dentists, right? And so it was something that I heard a lot of chatter about all throughout a lot of different communities and verticals. There's a lot of panic. And what's interesting about that, Len, is that, you know as well as I do, that sometimes there's really not a strong enough focus on reviews, and then I think practices will turn on that dial or start to focus on it. And once they do, they're really proud of those reviews. But I think it might be an important time, it's a great reminder if you're not focusing on reviews, if you don't even know how many Google reviews you have, it's probably something we should be taking a look at and be a little bit more aware of and mindful of. And I also find it interesting. It's human behavior to, maybe we don't value something until we start losing it. And then we think, oh gosh, we really should probably be focusing on that and paying some more attention to that. So I think that's probably really one of the reasons why we invited you on here today. And another reason why we've invited you to be a speaker at our upcoming summit, which we're excited about. And we'll talk more about later, but it's fascinating, how focus on reviews ebbs and flows in some places until they're threatened or until they start noticing a glitch in the system and they start disappearing. And then it can create panic, as we've seen.
100% so. Back to your initial question was that, practices I think are now realizing, as I got into this space in 2008 and 9 when reviews were not a thing. I had 30 at that time, and I had more than anybody else in the area. And 2 years later, I had 100 and something, and I dominated the area as well. Now if you don't have a few hundred, you're like considered underperforming. Yeah. Reviews were the biggest driver of practice, patients to my practice as a fee-for-service practice. When you look at what referral sources people have for an insurance-based practice, insurance patients are going to be number one. Okay. You may get patient referrals, and then the online sector is the third. I like the online sector to be even more than where most practices are. And one of the biggest drivers of that is just generating reviews, because when you're referred to a practice, when you are looking for a practice, you go on Google. I mean, literally 90% of the population goes on Google before making a decision. And the very first thing they see before they see your website, before they see any of the other information, they're going to see what other people are saying about you. And that's one of the first things they click on is, okay, let me check out the reviews that this office has. And whether you have 5,000, whether you have 20, that's where your first impression is made. That's really where the impression of joining a dental practice starts. Obviously they call the office, and then that's your ability to make another impression. But literally you have to put your best foot forward on Google, or else patients are not going to come in. I mean, it's that simple. I've interviewed thousands of patients over the years because I travel a ton. I like to engage the patients in the offices I go to. And a lot of times I ask them, they say, I came in because of the reviews. That was the biggest driver for me. And unfortunately, I don't think practices really know that. Because when the person answers the phone, they say, well, how did you hear about us? And they go online and they write, okay, checkbox online in their intake form. Online absolutely means nothing now. If you're asking and getting the answer online, you're way behind the 8 ball on that. There's Instagram, there's Facebook, there's TikTok, there's reviews, there's website, there's all these different directories. I mean, you need to delve into that question better and bigger, because you need to know where you should focus your attention on. I realized that very early that it was reviews. So I put all my eggs in one basket, obviously. Little did I know 10, 15 years later, we would be in the position we are now. Look, I had tried tons of things, and I threw lots of darts at things in dental practice. But the one thing that stuck was, and still worthwhile, is reviews. Okay. And I think it's going to continue forever, because we are a reputation society. Every single thing we do has some form of reputation behind it. When you go to a restaurant, you may go to Yelp. When you go to want to watch a movie, you may go to Rotten Tomatoes now. When you go to Amazon, you don't buy a 1-star product. You buy a 5-star product. Okay.
That's right.
Every single thing we do has some form of reputation attached to it. And when I search for businesses, I spend so much time looking at the reviews, and I look at the negative reviews. Actually, I want to see what problems they had in the practice. Or business, not what was good about it. Okay. Because I want to see what people are saying about the problems that may occur. Maybe a one-off thing, but I still want to know about it. So reviews are so important, not only for patients, but even for Google now. And if you don't generate reviews at a decent clip, you're not going to be ranking on the maps. And that's the visibility part of the arm. And speaking of my seminar that I give, it's called Raving Patients Get Visible, Get Credible, Get More New Patients. It's all about this whole arm that exists where you need to get reviews, you need visibility online, and that's how the reviews actually work for you. A practice that is visible and doesn't have enough reviews, that's a problem. And a practice that has reviews but not that visible is also a problem. You need both of these things. And that's really how reviews work for a practice to get to more new patients.
Yep, for sure. So obviously, to get good reviews, you have to have a great patient experience. But so let's assume everybody listening to this already has that nailed. So, what are your kind of your keys for getting more reviews? Is it technology? Is it personal touch? Because I've seen both work and I've seen both fail. So, what's your magic touch?
So I think it's a combination of those things, okay? Because if you have to ask, okay? If you don't ask, you don't get. Just like they say, if you build it, they will come. If you do not ask for a review, you won't get it. And if you ask manually, if you ask 100 patients that you know would leave a review for you, 98 of them will say, I love you. I'm going to go home and write a review. And if you're lucky, 2 to 5 people do it.
Yeah.
Okay. I like to have a conversation with a patient. I think 30 seconds of your day talking to a patient about how important it is for the practice, I think is a very important aspect that is missing from a lot of things. And we rely too much on automation. So I think automated messages are important because it simplifies the process that the front desk has to go through. But what happens when a patient comes up to the front desk? Okay, the first thing you ask them shouldn't be, "You owe this much money today. Give us your money." It should say, "How was your visit today?" That's the first thing that should come out of your mouth. How was your visit? And you're hoping, oh, it was great. It was as usual, simple, easy. You want anything that's positive to come out of that. And you want to have a conversation with them. That's amazing. We love hearing that. Just so you know, you may be getting a text message or email that's going to ask you for some feedback about your experience. We would really appreciate you taking a couple of moments to leave us some feedback because we love celebrating our 5-star reviews. That took 20 seconds, not even. And saying that to the patient makes a whole lot of difference in them wanting to do the review for you. Okay. So that to me is the automation plus the manual part of it that many practices still miss. And they rely too much on automation and wonder why they don't get a significant number of reviews. So that goes hand in hand with the patient experience. The other aspect of it, certain doctors, I wish everybody would call their patients after hours. Doesn't have to be the doctor. It could be a team member. Hey, Mrs. So-and-so, you came in today. We anesthetized you. We're checking in to see how you're feeling. How are you doing tonight? Oh, I'm doing great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you reaching out. Oh, by the way, did you get that text message that we sent you? There's a link to provide some feedback about your experience. I would really appreciate you taking a couple of moments to take care of that for us. So it's those minimal touch points that you have that make it really easy for the patients to do it and want to do it. Okay. But it all starts with the doctor preparing this reputation culture in the office. And I like to call it that. Now, reputation culture means that you know that you're being watched. Patients are watching you. They're watching you do your job, and they're going to go home and write a report about you. That's what a review is. That's what their experience is. And if you have that reputation culture, you're going to take feedback good and you're going to take feedback bad. And that's how you improve your practice. If a patient says every single time I'm there, I wait 25 minutes to be taken back, that's feedback for the practice. So what do you think you should do the next time the patient comes in? You should take them back right away because they're going to know that you read that feedback, you acted on it, and now you turned a critic into your biggest fans. And we don't do that as dentists. Okay. We want to ignore it. We don't look at the situation. We're always so defensive. If you get a bad review, some person didn't target your office. They used an alias, okay, not a real name because they don't want you to know who it is. And they wrote about their experience. Whether you believe it or not, you do provide some negative experiences. We're not perfect. I like to call it we're a dental practice for a reason. We're not called dental perfect because we're not perfect people. Patients leave the office for whatever reason, you're going to get bad reviews. It's not the end of the world. Okay.
Right.
But you have to give this outstanding customer service from the very beginning to start this level of trust. And that's what reviews do. They allow a patient to trust you. And what does a patient do when they trust you? They come back for more. They buy. They come back 6 months later. They refer others to you. So it's all in this cycle of the buying cycle that you have to offer this amazing experience, but also request them to talk about their experiences online. And we don't do enough of that.
Yeah, I would agree. It's funny, Len, because you talk about this and I remember the day, the era, right? And sometimes it's fun to look back at how far we've come. But I can remember working for a practice years ago and we would send out surveys once a year. Everybody on the team hated survey week because of how the doctor responded, right? The doctor got defensive. The doctor got sullen. The doctor would sulk. The doctor would be frustrated. He ignored the 800 positive surveys and narrowed in on the 3 to 4 negative. We do this as human beings, right? But we all hated that week because of how the doctors would respond to the negative feedback. And I think you absolutely nailed it. if we don't have a systematic process in place for all of the things that you just mentioned, but if we don't have a systematic process for what to do when we get that negative review, then in a way we've missed the most important part of the entire experience. So what I heard you say is, systems matter. We at the Team Training Institute, we focus a lot on systems. We focus a lot on our 3 pillars of practice success. Patient flow is one of those. And one of the vital systems we teach to support patient flow is our 8 R's: recall, recovery, activation, retention, referrals, reviews, reappointment. So we focused on these things for a while. And I'm sure you can agree that the practices that are the most successful have what you just defined as a clear system in place for reputation management, building that culture. It doesn't just happen. It's not just a wish, right? You have to have those systems in place so that your team can support this vision and help you drive it. So I love all of that. Another thing that I was going to mention is what I love you do with some of the groups and the communities that you've helped create in dentistry is you help people know how to respond when they get that negative review. What do you do about it? How do you respond? Now, sometimes we're like, oh my gosh, can you imagine if that was your practice or if you got that negative review? But as you mentioned, no one is perfect. Sometimes there are mean people that come through, and there's people that maybe have a vengeance or a vendetta or a former employee or whatever it may be. But I love that, you've created a community where we help support one another in how to best deal with those negative reviews. So just for a little fun, and I know that we don't want to derail this too far, but what's one of the worst reviews you've ever read? Like I don't know, I was putting you on the spot a little bit, but and how can you actually recover from a negative review? Let's talk about that for a second.
So let's talk about negative reviews in general, okay? So I always like to ask when I give a seminar, raise your hand if you've never received a negative review. And almost nobody raises their hand, okay? And usually if there is, they're in dental school because they haven't been in practice yet. If there's someone who's brand new and they raise their hand, you're not a dentist yet because you haven't got a bad review, okay? We're in an industry that there's a lot of negativity about. I mean, when you turn on the news, it's always about, if a dentist murders somebody, okay? The headline is dentist murders person. It's not they always talk about it as a dentist. Okay. There's so many stories about dentistry. It's negative stories, not positive ones. And I used to talk about that in my seminars. We need to put a positive spin on things. So dentists have a bad reputation overall for whatever reason, money hungry. You hear all these things. Even when I read local Facebook groups, there's always my dentist I went to is trying to rip me off. He tells I need 5 fillings. That's what it's always about. So you're going to get negative reviews. It's not the end of the world. Okay. In fact, I don't want a business to only have 5-star reviews. Okay. It looks false to me. It looks fake. Yep. I think you need to have some negative reviews. Now, what I like to joke around and say, if you only have positive reviews, then you need to piss a patient off once in a while and tell them to go home and write a bad review about you. Okay. Because it's good for business. Okay. Now, I ended my career with well over 2,000 5-star reviews. But I had 91 negatives. That's a lot of negative reviews to have. Okay. They weren't about my dentistry. They were about my New York attitude, which I'm direct, no doubt about it. I can be loud. Okay. I had rules in my practice. I was a fee-for-service practice. I wanted to be paid. Okay. When you don't follow the rules, you get in trouble basically in the practice. You miss appointments. There's strike 3 and you're out. Okay. The best thing you can do is fire a patient, but those patients are going to write bad reviews about you. Okay. So if you get a bad review, it's not the end of the world, okay? I always say people relax, calm down, and take a deep breath before you respond. I'm not a very big fan of responding to negatives online. I don't like to start a war of words. My first choice would always be to figure out who it is and then reach out to them personally. Yeah. Offline, okay? Start the conversation offline. See if you can make any headway there. Address the concern. What do you think the reason that patients go to Google to write a review? Well, they had a bad experience, obviously, but
they're not assertive enough to tell you directly,
or you haven't given the ability to do that. So one of the things, and again, this isn't about Bird Eye, but obviously I represent Bird Eye. One of the things Bird Eye has in the message we sent out is a red button that says "Contact us directly," and it says if you didn't have a great experience or had a problem, please contact us. That red button, it's green and red. The red button is hit many times when the patient has had a bad experience. They're not going to Google. They hit the red button to leave feedback for the practice. Mm-hmm. That you gave them the way to reach out to the practice. That prevents that bad review. Okay. But if you're not doing anything, you're going to get bad reviews. Okay. Again, I like taking it offline. I like contacting the patient, addressing their concern, fixing the problem if you can. A lot of times they're going to take the review down then because you address their concerns. Okay.
Yeah.
If you
Or,
can't
or
reach
leave
them,
so many updated reviews, right? Which said, we appreciate update to the review or appreciate that. I'm going to change the stars to this rating. And I think that's great too.
yep, exactly. There's nothing wrong with that. It shows that you actually are reaching out to people. But in terms of responding, you don't want to be crude. You don't want to be angry. You want to be calm and relaxed if you respond, and you want to address the patient's concerns. We can't violate HIPAA, so technically we can't even acknowledge them as a patient to some extent. I don't worry as much on positive reviews because someone who's unhappy or happy with the practice isn't going to care. But if you violate HIPAA on a negative review, that can get you into some problems. I have instances, everybody says, well, who's the HIPAA police? They are the Office of Civil Rights. And the Office of Civil Rights levies fines against businesses who violate HIPAA. And there's dentists who have been fined as much as $50,000 because they violated HIPAA by calling out the patient by their real name when they use a nickname on Google. So you have to be really careful what you say. I like a generic response. Always apologize, even if you're not sorry. You're sorry online because you're responding to the people who are reading the reviews, not to the person who wrote the review.
Yep.
Because in most cases, the person who wrote the review is not going to come back into the practice. Okay. Most times. Okay. In my entire career, I had 3 one-star reviews want to come back. And they had to take the review down because it's a lack of trust. And when patients don't trust me, I won't treat them. So they had to take the review down. 1 did and 2 didn't. And the 2 people that didn't, I dismissed. The 1 person that did was welcomed back into the practice with open arms, and we became really good friends because of it. So I just think you need a very generic response. Thank you for your feedback, or we accept all types of feedback, both good and bad. Please contact the office to address your concerns directly, because unfortunately I'm unable to answer publicly due to concerns about HIPAA. That's a very generic response. It will never get you into any problems. Mm-hmm. Now, there is a lot of dentists, or there's this particular dentist. His name is Tommy Murph. He's in Conway, South Carolina. And he's known for just being crude in his responses. And I give Tommy all the credit in the world. I know Tommy personally. I laugh when I read his responses. He's got a cult following. I personally could never say that. I mean, it's not in my wherewithal. I mean, I once had a patient who claimed I told her that she needed her fillings replaced because her children would be born with disabilities. That's what she said. I said to her, which, John, we know I would never say that to somebody. Yep. Okay. And what am I going to do? I'm going to call her a liar. You're a fat liar. Go to hell. I mean, I'm not going to do that. So I just left the review there. I knew who the patient was. It wasn't even worth my time. Okay. So the very best defense against a bad review, more positives. You drown it out. 15 reviews will drown out 1 positive and 1 negative. And that's what you do. You don't let it ruin your day, because a lot of people get their day ruined when they get a bad review. Oh, yeah. So there's a lot of different things you can do with negative reviews. I'm still waiting for a dentist to make something that shows, 1 star and put it on their T-shirt or put it on their website. You see that in other industries. I haven't seen it in dentistry yet. I'm waiting for someone to do that because I think it's brilliant to focus on the negative side of things sometimes and make a laugh out of it rather than want to sue a patient. There are dentists who sue people because they got a bad review. I would never go to that extent. So just be cognizant of the fact, address the concerns, and move on and get more positive. That's really what we want to do here. Yeah, awesome. Tell us a little bit about Bird Eye and how that helps with reviews. So Bird Eye is a automated reputation. I call it reputation marketing rather than a reputation management. Reputation management is really worrying about negative reviews. I want you to generate 5-star reviews and market them to generate more new patients. That's really the goal of our software. But it's an integrated platform. It's automated for the plaque practice. I do teach them to use some verbal skills as well. But we generate a review very easily from the patient. We have some techniques that allow it to be done very easily through a text message or email that the practice gets. But it's really what we do afterwards, in my opinion, that really separates us from the other people who do reviews. So we market the review for them. So it goes to Facebook and Instagram. It goes on the office's website. Our Bird Eye clients have a Bird Eye microsite where the reviews go as well, and that shows up in Google search. We also now have an AI tool that helps respond to reviews using artificial intelligence. And in my opinion, even more importantly, and I mentioned it, is we help with visibility. So we go into the local search and we make sure the name, address, and phone number of the practice is consistent online. So it's the combination of the credibility from the reviews and the visibility from the local search stuff. Practices rank higher, And when they rank higher, the reviews generate more new patients. And I know that there's many practices out there who have a lot of reviews, but they have zero visibility. Zero visibility. You cannot find them at all. And so the reviews aren't really working for them because nobody can see the practice. Yep. When you get the visibility, that's how the reviews actually turn into more new patients for the practice. So those are really the tools that we have. But the end result is more reviews, more credibility with Google, more trust with Google, better ranking because we're making sure the name, address, and phone number is consistent, and then ultimately more new patients coming into the practice.
Yeah, awesome. So we're so excited that you're going to be one of the speakers at our Champions of Dentistry annual summit. Tell us a little bit about what you're going to be talking about there.
You'll hear a lot of the things I talk about today, we'll talk about during the seminar, because I talk about visibility and credibility. I talk about dealing with negative reviews. So a lot of the things we talked about here, I'll go into a lot more detail. What's going to be great is I put a QR code up that the offices in attendance will be able to scan their business and see how they actually look online and how this NAP is consistent or not. And it's eye-opening for practices because they sit there and they see their scores like 20. And I usually ask, say, who's got the lowest score in the room? And I usually give them a prize for being the lowest. So the other offices, I like to do the worst office, not the best office. So they don't feel as bad. Okay. And then I ask how many reviews they have. It's a fun interactive session. We get a lot of laughter out of it because the negative review stuff is really funny. What other businesses have done and how dentists have responded and what they've done and what not to do and what to do when it comes to this stuff. So that's the seminar. It's called Raving Patients. It's my most popular one. I do it all the time, and I get rave reviews on it. So I'm looking forward to presenting at your summit in April.
Yeah, awesome. We thought it was perfect, Len, because our theme is profitability through 5-star patient care. And again, as we mentioned at the very beginning, the patient care part's what drives everything. And how can we have higher levels of profitability if we're not providing that 5-star patient care? But we decided to bring you in because, again, if we're providing 5-star patient care, we want our community to know that. And so they all, connect together and help drive practice success through generating higher levels of patient flow. That reputation management that you mentioned earlier is really critical as well, because we want our patients to be well served, but we want the community to know that we're doing a great job. So we couldn't be more excited to have you join us.
And what I'll do, thank you very much for that. But what I'll also do is, because you're talking about 5-star customer service, I have some very unique things that I did in my practice from a customer service perspective that I teach. And I'll add some of that in there so they get a little bit of, hey, this separates you from everybody else. It's what makes you different. So I'll add a couple of minutes of that in there and pull something else out to fit in the time frame. But I think they'll enjoy some of the things I talk about from a customer service experience as well.
Yeah, well, we're very much looking forward to it. And I appreciate you so much for being with us today, Len. And so that's it for this episode of the W Production Podcast. We'll see you next time.
I've got one more thing to add, John.
Okay.
And that is, for our listeners now, you can go to championsofdentistry.com, find out the information about the summit. I believe we're still in the early bird phase. So you can get an early bird discount for registering before March 24th. So if you're hearing this podcast now, the window of opportunity is shortening. So be sure you join us. We'd love to see you there at the summit, and you'll be able to meet and hear Dr. Len in person. And we'll look forward to a great time together for sure.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much, everybody.
Thanks.